What do you mean by shut up and listen?
You know, it's really funny is Harper Collins approached me about 18 months ago and said, you know, Tilman, we watch your TV show and we see you on all these business shows and sports shows and we read these articles and we love all these Tilmanisms and we don't want you to write a life story, but we love these little one-liners that you use and we love the way you go so direct at people to help them grow their business and we'd like you to just talk about that. Not stories, not a life story, but the basics. It's take the word no out of your damn vocabulary. It's there are no spare customers. It's change, change, change. It's things like that. You have to know your numbers. And this is it's an easy reading book, and it really gets to the basics.
How did you come up with Tilmanisms?
You know, I didn't come up with it, but people that I do business with and investment bankers, we would be in negotiations and and I would just always throw these out, and they just kind of caught on. And so when I wrote the book, I called everybody up. I said, y'all write down all my Tilmanisms because, you know, y'all always talk about my Tilmanisms, and I don't want to forget any of them. So there's a whole page of just Tilmanisms in there.
Why the restaurant business?
It's kind of interesting is I was in Texas in the 80s, and if you remember the 80s, the world fell apart. And that's when all the banks failed. And I had invested in one restaurant, Larry, and you couldn't do anything. The building just shut down. There was no development. And so I bought out all my partners, and I said, well, I'll just go grow restaurants for a few years since there's no development happening. And that's what I did. And then in the early 90s, that's when all the companies started going public. That was the big stock market boom. If you remember when Clinton came in, where they even got rid of the national debt because of all the capital gains. But that's when like Chili's and Outback and Cheesecake Factory and Lone Star and Landry's, we all went public. And all of a sudden you wake up one day, you have 12 restaurants, but because of your growth rate, you're worth $100 million. And so for the next 20 years, I was basically public. And then when the crisis happened again in 08, 09, I saw an opportunity because my stock was down to go private again, owning 100%. And that's what I've done since then.
Restaurant business is one of the toughest. You don't get a second chance. People don't want to go back if the food ain't good.
You do not get a second chance. It's amazing how even a restaurant can be brand new and people will not give it that second opportunity.
Also, people tell me that the restaurant business is the toughest business to run from afar. How can you run 18 restaurants?
Well, I'll run 600.
How can you?
You know, it's systems and controls, and you've got to have a strong culture, and you've got to have a good HR department. And I've been successful because not only do I open up a lot of restaurants, I've bought a lot of restaurant companies because upstairs the management wasn't doing a good job. I mean, just in the LA area, look at all the restaurant companies that I own. Everything from Mastro's to Catch to Martin's to Bubba Gump to Rainforest to...
You own Catch?
Yes, I own 50% of Catch.
Not
Absolutely.
doing bad.
Not doing bad at all. Either is that Mastro's over there in Beverly Hills.
A lot of fun, too.
A lot of fun. You know, it's great to own great restaurants, and I love being in the gaming business. I own the 5 Golden Nugget casinos, and it's been good. It's been good.
Did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
Always. It's kind of funny, and I talk to people about this all the time, and one of the things I talk about in the book, Larry, is you got to know what you're good at, and God gave us all a gift, and I sure wasn't going to win a Grammy. I took guitar lessons for 4 years and still struggled to play a chord. I wasn't going to win an Emmy. I wasn't going to do a lot of things. I sure can't draw anything, but you know what I knew? I knew that I'd had a DNA gene of business. And when I was a little kid, I'd carry around my briefcase of business. And in junior high, I was selling candy to students. By high school, I was playing the stock market. And when I was 21, I had already won my first Cadillac selling Shackley vitamins. And I told myself when I'm 35, I'm going to have my first jet. And I'm going to be on the Forbes 400 list when I'm 50. And thank God they all happened, Larry.
Did luck play a part in it?
You always have a little luck, but you also set yourself up in a position to be lucky. And, you know, somebody asked me, what about all these tech billionaires that all of a sudden they become millionaires just because they created a little app that never was going to really be successful? But you know what? They got lucky because a bigger company bought them, but they still set themselves up by being in the right place and creating something.
Is Landry's the biggest?
Landry's is the parent company, and there's only like 30 or 40 Landry's restaurants. But like I said, I have everything from Bubba Gump to Rainforest to Mastro's to Martin's to McCormick and Schmick to Chart House. All those are mine. They're all company owned.
Mastro's too?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Dennis, he doesn't own it anymore.
No, I've owned it for almost 10 years. Almost 10 years, and grown it to be a huge group of restaurants.
You specialize in steakhouses and
Steakhouse and seafood, a lot of seafood. Joe's Crab Shack, the Bubba Gumps are more seafood. I hit, and you know what I just bought last week was Del Frisco's. I don't know if you're familiar with
I eat there all the time.
Which one?
The one in New York?
Yeah, absolutely.
The one in Beverly Hills?
Sure. They just opened.
Yeah.
I bought
Been there 3 times.
Absolutely. They do a great job. But
do.
Once again, the restaurants were very successful, but they had problems at the corporate level. And, you know, you got to protect your balance sheet and you got to protect your liquidity. And what I believe in, and I talk about it in the book, Larry, you got to be an opportunist. And you know what happens when people are weak? I like to eat them. So.
How did that urge to be successful work for you? You had to have some failures.
I've had lots of failures, Larry, but I never had that one to bring me down. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of like borrowing money. And this is where so many people make mistakes in business and they drink their own Kool-Aid is anytime I ever gave a bank a pro forma of borrowing money, I always did another pro forma for myself that said worst case scenario. Okay, because that's usually what happens 90% of the time. But people start drinking their own Kool-Aid and thinking that they're smarter and better than they are. And I always ran the numbers on if it is this bad, am I going to still be able to make it through tough times? And I think that's one of the reasons I've been successful. And, you know, I talk about in this the book, there's a paddle for everybody's ass. I have no fear, but I worry about everything. And the day that you don't think that paddle can get you, you know, it will get you.
Were you ever broke?
I was never broke because I was always conservative. Did I have tough times in the 80s and even in the 90s? Absolutely. But I was never broke. I don't ever want to be broke. That's a scary word, Larry.
What made you buy the Houston Rockets?
You know what's funny, Larry, is they were the San Diego Rockets, and I don't even know if you remember that.
A long time ago.
Long time. I was in junior high school, and I remember them coming to town, and Elvin Hayes was their big center. And I'm a big U of H person. I'm still chairman of the Board of Regents there. And they played in the game of the century. Remember Elvin and Lou Alcindor in Houston, Texas? That was the first big basketball
national
game.
Telecast?
Yeah.
The biggest national telecast.
Ever. There'd never been anything like that before in the Houston Astrodome. And so I was since I grew up in the area, I was a big Elvin Hayes fan. And the Houston Rockets were getting moved to Houston, Texas. And so I started listening to the radio because you didn't have the NBA on TV then, if you remember. And they moved to Houston, and I was a fan ever since. And even today, I'm like the 30th longest tenured season ticket holder. Is that not unbelievable? That's how long I've been a Houston Rocket fan. And then I was a partner between 82 and 92 when I was very young because the team only sold for $10 million in 1982. You know how sports franchises have appreciated. 10 years later, the team sells for $85 million. I have a bid in with somebody else to buy it for $80. We lose. I sit next to Les Alexander for the next 25 years, center court, front row. He's the owner. And then I buy it 25 years later for $2.2 billion.
Why did you spend that much?
Because there's never been a sports team sell for less than it did before. And it's the one thing you can count on is a sports teams, because of the content, and you know how important content is today, was going to always appreciate.
So the employees all over the country that you pay the most to are your basketball players.
I've got 2 $40 million basketball players in James Harden and Russell Westbrook, and I'm happy to have them, Larry.
Is it easy to sign those checks?
You know, the numbers have to work on any business, and it's all part of the business of that business. And with sponsorship money and ticket revenue, the numbers work, okay? Because they have to work or you couldn't do that. And it doesn't really matter. Remember, your only cost of sales, your big cost of sales there is the players. And it's a collective bargaining agreement, and you're going to have to give, I think it's 50 and a half, something like that, to your players, and then you decide how you want to spend it.
There's a degree of socialism to it. The players can control the, right? A player on your team might take a cut to get you to sign the other guy.
That doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen very often. So it's also kind of set up in the NBA where there's no crazy bidding, because if you are this tenured of a player and you've won an MVP or you're an all-star, this is the most you can make. That's why, like LeBron and James Harden and Russell Westbrook and all these guys and Chris Paul make a certain amount of money, but not more than anybody else. There's a bunch of them in that top category right there.
How are they going to do this year?
I think it's going to be a great, shootout in the West. I mean, it's open. I don't think this has ever happened before, but with what the Clippers did, with what Utah did, as good as Denver is, Golden State, with us having Russell and James and Clint and PJ and Eric, I think it's going to be a lot of fun this year, Larry. I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun.
How many games you go to?
I go to 40, probably out of 41 home games. You always have that one game a year that you just have a conflict that you can't get out of. In road games, probably 25%. But I love to come here in L.A. and watch the Clippers and the Lakers.
Never miss a beat. Subscribe to Larry King now and watch new episodes every day.